Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So, whether you're a music lover or just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. So, last week was Mental Health Awareness Week, which meant heightened conversations around emotional well-being, checking in with ourselves and others, and how to get the help that you need. But mental health isn't just something that we should talk about one week a year. For many people, myself included, it's a daily, ongoing journey. And one thing that's been a constant companion in that journey? Music. So in today's episode, we're looking at the powerful relationship between music and mental health, whether it's lifting us out of a dark place, soothing anxiety, or helping us process grief or trauma. Music has this ability to meet us exactly where we are and be there for us when it feels like maybe nothing else is. We'll explore what the science says and how you can use music more intentionally to support your own mental well-being. We'll touch on depression, anxiety, and even trauma. And I'll also be sharing some reflections from you, the listeners, about how music has helped you cope. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Now, I do want to do future episodes where I dive deeper into each mental health disorder, but for this episode, I want to do more of an overview to kind of set the scene and just have a general understanding of the many ways that music interacts with our mental health. So let's begin with two of the most common and often invisible mental health challenges. We've got depression and anxiety. These mood disorders affect hundreds of millions of people globally, and while they show up differently for everyone, they often share a sense of emotional disconnection from others, from ourselves, and sometimes even from life. When people talk about music and mental health, depression and anxiety are usually the first areas where music makes a visible impact, because even when words fail or motivation disappears, music can still reach us. So there are three main ways that music supports people with depression and anxiety. There's mood elevation, distraction and regulation, and emotional connection and expression. So let's start off with mood elevation. We know that music has the power to lift our mood. We experience this on a daily basis, but it's actually proven in the science. So one study conducted a randomized controlled trial to examine the effects of music therapy on individuals with moderate to severe depression. Participants who received 20 biweekly music therapy sessions alongside standard care, which is medication or counseling, they actually showed significantly greater improvements in mood, motivation, and social functioning compared to the control group who just received treatment as usual. And what's remarkable here is not just the emotional uplift, but also the tangible gains in the day-to-day functioning as well. Another study done in 2017 found that participants who engaged in regular music therapy sessions showed reductions in depressive symptoms compared to those achieved through what are called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And that is a mouthful, also known as SSRIs, and these are the medications that are typically taken for depression and anxiety. And this was found especially when therapy was maintained over several months. And of course, while this doesn't mean that we should ditch medications altogether, it does highlight the potential for music to either supplement or even in some cases replace traditional treatments, particularly for individuals who may experience side effects or limited results with antidepressants. Now, this isn't just about feeling better, it's also about what's happening in the brain. Another study by Salimpour and colleagues in 2011 used a combination of PET scans and fMRI scans to explore how our brains respond to what we see as pleasurable music. And they found that listening to music, especially emotionally moving or upbeat tracks, activated the brain's dopaminergic reward system. And this system is the same one targeted by many antidepressants. In people with depression, this reward circuitry is often underactive, leading to low motivation and an inability to feel pleasure. The fact that music can activate this pathway suggests that it might offer a natural, side effect free alternative, or at least complement to pharmacological treatments. So, all of this reinforces this simple but powerful idea that music is not just entertainment. For many, it's medicine. Another powerful way that music supports mental health issues like depression and anxiety is through emotional regulation and distraction. When we're anxious, overwhelmed, or mentally spiraling, music offers a unique way to shift our emotional state, sometimes more quickly and effectively than words or logic ever could. So let's start off with distraction. Cognitive neuroscience tells us that music can absorb our attention in a way that diverts us from ruminative or distressing thoughts. One study found that listening to personally meaningful music, so particularly songs that evoked positive memories or associations, reduced anxiety and stress in participants, especially those prone to rumination. And this kind of musical distraction is particularly valuable because it doesn't just mask the negative thoughts, it redirects attention towards something emotionally and cognitively engaging. And then there's emotional regulation, how we use music to modulate our moods, calm ourselves down, or even safely express anger or sadness. And one widely cited model here was developed by Sarah Kallio and Ericala in 2007, which identified several key strategies people use when engaging with music to regulate their emotions. These include entrainment, which is music as background noise or ambience. Then you have discharge, which is releasing strong emotions through perhaps intense music. Mental work, which is processing feelings through lyrics, for example. And then you have solace, which is finding comfort from more empathetic music when you're feeling low. These emotional regulation strategies were shown to be particularly prevalent amongst adolescents and young adults. And these are groups that are often more vulnerable to mood disorders. But they also do extend across the lifespan as well. I'm sure a lot of you listening can really relate to some of those as well. But what's unique about music compared to other forms of emotional support is that it can meet us exactly where we are. I think I said this in the beginning, but it really can mirror our sadness when we need to feel understood. It can elevate us when we need to shift our energy. And because it's nonverbal, it often works at a more intuitive bodily level, which is especially helpful for people who struggle to articulate their emotions in perhaps more conventional therapy. One study found that patients who engaged in regular music listening, especially using curated playlists which were designed to match and then gradually shift their emotional states, experienced decreased anxiety and improved emotional control. Now, I want to talk a bit more about this process. This is something known as the ISO principle, and it's actually been outlined in music therapy intervention manuals, suggesting that individuals who suffer from affective disorders benefit from listening to music in this way. The principle comprises of listening to music that matches the current mood at first, and then to gradually shift to music that represents a desired mood. It's been shown to be super effective overall and is even something that you can self-administer at home and try out yourself. Music's ability to regulate physiological responses has also been well documented. So research has shown that slow tempo, calming music leads to reductions in heart rate, cortisol levels, and blood pressure in individuals undergoing stressful medical procedures. And this shows that music doesn't just influence mood, it also calms the body's stress response, helping people return to a state of equilibrium. But equally, it's about selecting music that works for you. So For some, listening to just music you enjoy is equally as comforting and can also lead to reductions in physiological measures. It doesn't necessarily have to be this kind of slow meditation music that's quite conventional. And I think that's actually amazing and really attests to our kind of individual taste. But one type of music that people often turn to at times of struggle is sad music. And this is kind of a more intuitive response. I actually did a whole episode on our enjoyment of sad music. So do check out episode 9 if you want a little bit more on that. But just to kind of summarize, sad music often leads to feelings of comfort, catharsis, and emotional validation, showing that music can support complex emotional processing, even when it's not conventionally happy music. People listen to it as it feels like someone is reflecting your emotions. It comes back to this experience of music as a mirror. And yeah, a lot of people do turn to that at times of struggle and find it extremely comforting. In short, music gives us a safe space to feel without judgment and with just the right amount of control. Whether it's to distract from spirals or to lean into emotion, it's a tool of co regulation that meets us exactly where we are and also helps guide us somewhere better. Now, I want to take some time to share some of your voices. Over the past few days, I asked my community to reflect on how music has supported them through their mental health journeys, whether that's dealing with trauma, grief, anxiety, or simply just getting through the tough days. And what I received was honest, raw, and honestly so deeply moving. These stories are a powerful reminder that music doesn't just live in studies or theory, it lives in us, in our memories, our healing, and those everyday moments of resilience. And some of you felt comfortable telling the story in your own words, which I think just adds an extra layer of vulnerability to the stories. So I want to feature them throughout today's episode. Starting off with one story from a man who discusses his experience of getting sober quite a while ago now, but kind of reflecting on the feelings of anxiety, fear, and shame that he felt during that time and how music kind of pulled him out of it and was almost like a friend that was there for him during that period of time. So let's listen to his story.
Hi, my name's Michael Swerdloff, and I'm a music lover. So, music's been an integral part of my life pretty much, gosh, as long as I can remember. But there's two specific time periods that I think about when music as medicine was really valuable in my life. First one was in 1989 when I first got sober. I was so anxious and full of anxiety and stress and confusion and strife and anger and shame. And I didn't really know what to do with it all, but I was doing what people were telling me and trying my darndest. And I remember a friend of mine turned me on to some music from Windham Hill Records. And so I started listening to some of that before I went to bed. And George Winston's December became the soundtrack of me falling to sleep for about 6 months or a year. And many years later, I got to see him perform actually a few times, but one of them, we had a great conversation afterwards, and I was sharing this with him. And I also shared with him that when I was younger, um, and was the music director, program director at a college radio station, that Windham Hill had sent us some albums, and I just didn't think they made sense. So he had called to see what we thought of them, and I told him that I didn't really think they were appropriate for what we did. So I was also able to make an amends to him directly, which felt really sweet and kind. The other experience that comes up for me was I had a incredibly rare condition, that there was lots of things that happened, but one of them was I really couldn't walk for about 6, 7 years, even well with a cane. And I was getting some testing done at the National Institutes of Health, and one of the tests they needed to do on me, I needed to lie down on basically a gurney for about 5 hours while doing the testing, and it wasn't comfortable for me to even lie on my back for 10 minutes. And the guy who that was, facilitating the test said that he had a boombox in his room, and the only CD that he had was Miles Davis, um, Kind of Blue, and I love that, and so basically, that was on repeat for the whole 5 hours, and I would fall asleep and wake up, fall asleep, and all the different kinds of consciousness. But what's interesting was for the next, like, several months after that testing, anytime I got nervous or anxious or my body got tight, I just started humming the theme to Freddie Freeloader, and it sort of became the theme of my recovery when I started to walk again and move and run and play and dance and sing and ride my bike and all of the things. Um, so yeah, for this particular thing, it's George Winston and Miles Davis were the soundtracks and the medicine for two different recoveries in my life, and so grateful for both of them and all of the other artists.
Such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's such a vulnerable thing to speak about your experiences and struggles with mental health. So I really do appreciate every single person who submitted something to me and felt comfortable with sharing that. But yeah, I love that story, especially the themes of emotional self regulation with music and having the kind of theme to your recovery. I think that's something so powerful and allows you to take that autonomy over your journey. There's also one more story that I want to feature in this section, and that's from a woman who speaks of her health struggles. And I think that really fits into this theme here of music being a comfort to the physiological side of things as well as the mental side of things, but also being a distraction and form of regulation when we're going through something so difficult.
I wanted to share my experience with how music has been not only a huge part of my life, but very healing at a very difficult time and a traumatic time in my life. Although music has always been a huge part of my life since I was born, really, because I had a very musical family. Um, about, almost 4 years ago when COVID started, of course, as everybody knows, that was a very difficult time for the entire nation, the entire world, and being alone a lot, not being able to go out, that alone was difficult. Music was so helpful and so healing to keep me out of depression. Plus, I had a major surgery that was impending that unfortunately I was not looking forward to. When that day came, on December 1st of that year, hospitals were pretty much on lockdown. Went into surgery at a very good hospital, and unfortunately, I was in there because I had an aneurysm, and it also had to do with my kidneys. So I had to have one removed, the other one removed, and then have it retransplanted back in, all within the same surgery. The surgery was a success, although, as we already knew, I would have to stay at the hospital, which I did for 2 to 3 weeks. With no visitors except my husband was allowed to visit once a day for 15 minutes, and that was it. I wasn't able to even turn on a TV or do anything. Couldn't even talk for a while because of a breathing tube that I had. So that was a very, very dark time, a very dark time for me with nobody to talk to, nothing to listen to except whispers of people in the hallway because it was deathly quiet because nobody was allowed to have visitors, and it was up in the ICU ward. So when like a week later, when I was allowed to have the breathing tube out and I was allowed to have my glasses on, but I still had my hands tethered down so I didn't pull out the other tubes, they asked me if they could put on the TV for me because I could see now. She started flipping through the channels for me, and it ended up on a music station, something that was light jazz, or I'm not even sure, maybe classic rock. I asked her to please leave it. I asked the nurse, and she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." Well, every shift after that of the nurses that came in kept asking, "Are you sure you didn't want me to change a channel and put a show on?" No. I said, "I just want the music to keep playing." And I will tell you, having that music during that time, which was one of the darkest in my life, very traumatic, was not just healing, but uplifting. And it really kept me going, kept me on a even keel in my mind. And every nurse, every shift would ask, and I would hear them talk in the hallway, changing shifts. "Did you change the TV?" She doesn't want to change. It's really weird. All she wants is music. That's right. That was all I wanted. That was all that I wanted. And when it was time to transfer me to a rehab center, after a couple of weeks, um, same thing. Even though I was able to start sitting up, I just wanted my music because, again, you could not have visitors and you had to stay in your room. When I was finally able to come home, I had to get in-home nursing care. I still couldn't sit at my keyboard very well, but I had learned the ukulele right when COVID started to help ease my loneliness. And I will tell you, that little light instrument, I was able to make music myself. And so just creating music is such a joy, whether it's for yourself, which it was, or for others. And nowadays, uh, fast forward several years later, I do teach, but at the same time, I now entertain at a local long-term rehab center for patients who have undergone the same thing, or patients who are there long-term and go there once a month and play my ukulele, play the piano, and sing and uplift them the same way that I was uplifted with music. And I'll tell you, that to me, that's such a blessing right there, is being able to do that for others. Just seeing the smile on their faces, and seeing them sing along, and it's a blessing.
Another amazing story that really kind of speaks to your resilience of what you've been through. It's really incredible. And I love that you have used your own experiences with music to now give back to the community and make sure that people are also now able to reap those same benefits that you did during your healing journey. I think that's absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for sharing. Now I want to go back to the last way that music kind of helps depression and anxiety, and that's through emotional connection and expression. Now, one of the most profound powers of music lies in its ability to help us feel, to express, release, and connect with emotions that might otherwise remain buried or unspoken. And in the context of mental health, this is especially important. Many people living with depression, anxiety, or trauma describe feeling emotionally numb or disconnected, either from others or from themselves. And music can really gently reopen that emotional channel. At its core, music provides what psychologists call effective mirroring. It reflects our internal emotional state back to us. Something even helping us name feelings that we couldn't previously articulate. For some, it's the lyrics that speak volumes, those moments where a song just seems to tell your story, almost as if it was written just for you. And this is known as lyrical identification, and it can be deeply validating. When we hear someone else express our fears, heartbreak, or longing, it reminds us that we're not alone in what we're feeling. For others, it's not the lyrics, perhaps, but the sound itself. Maybe it's the tone of a cello, the rawness of a voice, or the ache in a melody that gives shape to the emotions that they're feeling. And this emotional connection extends beyond the self. Music is also a social glue. It connects us with others through shared tastes, concert experiences, playlists sent between friends, or even songs that are just tied to collective memories. For people who feel isolated or misunderstood, finding community through music can be a lifeline. And this can be through online communities or just connecting with friends over shared artists. But I think especially in today's digital age, it can be a large benefit for those with depression and anxiety to connect with people online, as connecting in person often feels heavy and difficult. So this is really a great way to kind of build that sense of community. And just to finish off with, of course, we can't talk about expression without talking about actually creating music. Composing music, whether it's writing a song or just playing an instrument, allows people to externalize complex emotional experiences. I used to do songwriting workshops with young girls who, a lot of them had depression and anxiety, and it was amazing to see them be able to use music as an outlet for expression and also bond over this shared emotional experience. To put it simply, music helps us feel what we've been holding in and often what we've been afraid to face. In doing so, it doesn't just express our emotions, it helps us process and move through them. It's kind of an unspoken therapy that doesn't require the right words, it just requires the right song. Now, on that note, I have a story here from one listener who speaks of his battle with depression and actually how one particular song set him on the road to his healing journey.
So I suffered from depression for years because I had some issues I couldn't resolve, and there were also people around me who made me feel bad. So I was constantly bitter and angry. I hated everything and everyone, most of all myself. Then, about 5 years ago, I heard a Spanish song called Resistiré, which was like a kick in my butt. It's about different challenges in life and finding your inner strength and keeping on living. There's a line that says, Cuando mi enemigo sea yo, which means when my enemy is me. And that hit me hard. So at first I cried my eyes out. Then I was like, that's it. I can't go on like this anymore. I have to move on and change my life. And for the first time ever, I finally had the strength to do it. It also taught me that life is never easy, that shit is always going to happen. We can't avoid it, but we can choose how we deal with it.
Beautiful words there. Thank you so much for sharing. Now I want to move on and talk about trauma and PTSD. When we talk about trauma, especially psychological trauma or PTSD, we often focus on what's happening in the mind. But trauma lives in the body just as much as it does in our memory. It shapes our nervous system, our heart rate, our startle reflex, and even our breath. And that's why so many trauma-informed therapies today are body-based, and music fits right into that approach. So let's start off with rhythm, which is one of the most primal aspects of music. Our bodies are literally rhythmic instruments. Our heartbeat, our breath, our walking pace, and trauma often disrupts that natural rhythm. People with PTSD may feel disconnected from their body, hypersensitive, or stuck in a constant state of what we call hyperarousal, which is kind of being in that fight or flight mode. And music, especially through rhythm-based interventions like drumming, can help reestablish a sense of internal regulation. Studies suggest that rhythm helps participants reconnect with their bodies and also build trust in group settings and access non-verbal forms of expression, which are all crucial components in trauma recovery. Drumming has also been studied in military populations. One study looked at veterans with PTSD participating in facilitated drumming workshops, and they observed reductions in hypervigilance, social withdrawal, and emotional numbing. The veterans described the experience as releasing, like something trapped in the body was finally being shaken loose. They also experienced an increased sense of openness, togetherness, belonging, sharing, connectedness, and intimacy, as well as achieving a non-intimidating access to traumatic memories, which really help to facilitate an outlet for rage and just regaining a sense of self-control. But it's not only drumming. Listening to music, especially emotionally expressive or familiar songs, can provide a safe container for processing painful emotions. Trauma often leaves people unable or afraid to feel or name what's happening inside. Music can act as a buffer, allowing someone to revisit difficult feelings with a sense of control and safety. In trauma-informed music therapy, this principle is taken even further. Therapists may co-create playlists with clients, starting with grounding songs and gradually introducing tracks that evoke more difficult emotions. This helps build emotional tolerance, all within a context that feels creative but controlled. Another remarkable technique is songwriting, used in trauma therapy with survivors of abuse or conflict. Writing lyrics allows people to tell their story, sometimes for the first time, without needing to use direct or clinical language. It creates distance, metaphor, and choice. Many studies have found that songwriting helped adolescents with traumatic histories reframe their experiences, express repressed emotions, and even improve their self-concept. And this extends to throughout our lifespan as well. Now, I know I spoke about the use of drumming circles with veterans in this section, but one person actually shared the most incredible story with me about their father, who was actually a Vietnam War veteran, and he actually was involved in a songwriting program that helped him process his PTSD. And it's such an amazing, touching story. So I'm going to let her explain it in her own words.
My dad is a Vietnam veteran. Like most veterans who served over there, he did not talk much about his experiences while he was there. He had always been a musician, played guitar, mandolin, sang, for as far back as I can remember. Music has always been an important part of our lives. Several years ago, he got involved with a foundation called Operation Song. I believe it's based out of Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm not certain. Operation Song pairs a veteran with a songwriter. It takes place over a weekend. They get together, they talk. The veteran tells the songwriter a story or two or something similar, and the songwriter writes a song. It's very therapeutic for the veteran. It was extremely therapeutic for my dad. It kind of opened the floodgates for him in talking about some of his time over there. Obviously, we don't get the really hard stories because he doesn't want to burden us with those memories. So my dad wrote a CD about his time in Vietnam. It is called Midnight in July. There are 8 to 10 songs on the CD revolving around his time in Vietnam. He has also been involved with a reunion group of his company, the 152nd Infantry. He plays these songs for them. They enjoy them very much. It's helped him healing. I believe it's helped some of them in their healing as well. There is one song on that CD that really tears me apart. It's called Bear That Weight. And it basically explains why he specifically couldn't come home and talk about his experiences over there because he didn't want to burden us with those memories. I cried snot sobs the first time I heard it, and I have not been able to listen to it since because it hurts my heart to know that there are things he cannot talk about. Also, if you look up Michael Hertz on YouTube, you can find the CD, Midnight in July. You'll also find, I think it's broken up into part 1 and part 2 of an interview that he did with a gentleman in his local area in Florida, where they speak about the CD and how Dad wrote the songs and what some of the songs mean and things like that.
Such an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And your dad is incredible. And I'm so glad that he got to be a part of such a program and have that release. I think that must have been so important for him and also for you as a family to listen to that. It's really amazing. Now, I have one last story from a survivor of abuse, and she details her experiences with music from when she was a child, really, and having music as her first friend kind of guide her through that emotional healing journey. So I'll let her kind of attest to that in her own words.
Music speaks when you can't find the words, when someone tries to take your voice, when your breath can no longer articulate. My narcissistic bio mom was my first bully. She didn't know how to regulate her own emotions, so she projected on me a lot. I stayed in my room to be safe from her. Madonna, Whitney Houston, and Debbie Gibson were my first friends. Because of You by Kelly Clarkson, Can't Take That Away by Mariah Carey, and Out of Love by Alessia Cara were songs that validated my experience and helped me heal. For 8 years as a little girl, I was raped Monday to Friday. Songs like Till It Happens to You by Lady Gaga let me know I wasn't alone and that someone saw me, especially since my own mother never listened, never believed, called me a liar. Today, as a wife, mother, and trauma-informed advocate, I share songs like Mary J's The Living Proof, Whitney's I Didn't Know My Own Strength, and B's I Was Here, to hopefully help others feel strengthened and capable in their own recoveries. It's the honest truth when you hear people say music saves lives.
That's such a vulnerable story, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I think that really highlights that when it comes to music, PTSD, and trauma, the common thread here is agency. Trauma often takes that away, the ability to choose, to express, to feel safe in your own body. But music, in its many forms, it offers a path back to those things. Whether it's through a steady drum beat, a lyric that hits home, or a melody that brings tears, music can help survivors piece themselves back together, one rhythm or one note at a time. Now, while music can be incredibly healing, it's important to acknowledge that it isn't always beneficial, at least not unconditionally. For some people, especially those dealing with depression, anxiety, or trauma, music can actually, in some cases, amplify distress instead of easing it. I went into this in my episode on sad music as well, but it's been found that individuals prone to rumination, so those repetitive, negative thought cycles, may actually feel worse after listening to sad or emotionally intense music. So in these cases, the music doesn't offer that release. It kind of reinforces the loop. And this kind of maladaptive listening can deepen hopelessness or reinforce negative beliefs, especially if someone is using music not to process emotions, but rather to kind of dwell in them. In other words, it becomes a tool for emotional avoidance or self-punishment, not healing. There's also the issue of triggering lyrics or associations. For people with PTSD, a song linked to a traumatic event, whether it was playing during a breakup, an accident, or even an abusive situation, it can reawaken distressing memories without warning. In these cases, music becomes a kind of sensory cue, like smell or sound, that pulls someone back into their trauma. While music can provide a safe space, it can also re-expose listeners to unresolved trauma if they're not prepared. And that's why the context and the intentionality behind music listening matters so much. This has always been something that's fascinated me because, of course, so many of us associate music with positive feelings and, even by default, healing. But for many, their relationship with music can be complex. there is such thing as musical trauma, whether it's because a particular song or type of music is linked to a traumatic event, or because emotions elicited by music are so deeply felt by perhaps more empathetic people. It can be a trigger. So before going through treatment, the context really needs to be investigated. And if you're dealing with things on your own, I really encourage you to be aware of whether there's any songs that you need to avoid for your own healing process. There actually used to be a Spotify feature where you could essentially block songs. But before recording this episode, I checked and it seems like it's been removed. I'm not really sure why. I disagree with that purely for reasons like this, but okay then. Let me know if you guys have this feature, because I only seem to have it for artists, not for songs themselves. But anyway, this is where music therapy differs from casual music listening. In therapy, a trained professional helps guide the musical process. They choose music purposefully, respond to emotional cues, and work with the client to unpack what comes up, rather than leaving them to navigate those intense feelings alone. But it's also important to note that music is not a replacement for therapy or medical treatment, especially before I go into the next section on some advice on how to use music for mental health. So while music can elevate mood and aid emotional processing, it can't address the root cause of mental illness on its own. For many, it works best as a complement, something that sits alongside talk therapy, medication, or somatic practices. But that being said, music offers something unique. It connects us to emotion, memory, culture, and self-expression in ways that no pill or textbook ever can. When used intentionally and with self-awareness, it becomes one of the most accessible and powerful tools for self-care that we have. So, as you reflect on your own relationship with music, consider asking, what role is music playing in my emotional landscape? Is it helping me move through emotions, or is it keeping me stuck? Now, to finish off, I want to bring this episode back to the everyday, because while research and therapy are vital, one of music's greatest strengths is how accessible and flexible it is in our daily lives. Unlike formal interventions or structured therapies, music listening is something you can do on your own terms. It's portable, it's adaptable, and it's available at any time, whether you're lying in bed, commuting to work, or just taking a few moments for yourself. And like I said, it definitely isn't a replacement for therapy, but for many of us, it's really advice that we can use to guide us through those extra rough days. Just like some of the stories that you guys shared with me. So here are a few recommendations that I have for using music more mindfully for your mental health. Starting off with personalized playlists. One of the most practical and powerful ways to use music for mental well-being is by creating intentional, personalized playlists. And these aren't just random songs. They're curated soundtracks that support how you feel or guide you towards how you want to feel. You might have a calming playlist for anxious moments, an energizing one for when you feel low, a cathartic one for when you need to cry or process emotion, or even a confidence booster mix for moments of self-doubt. And research shows that people who use music strategically in this way report greater emotional self-awareness and improved emotional regulation over time. It's about using music not just as background noise, but as a tool. So if you haven't already, try this out. Pick a theme or a mood or feeling and try to channel that through a playlist. And let me know how it goes. Another gentle yet powerful practice is journaling with music. You can put on a song that resonates emotionally and then write whatever comes up, whether it's a memory, a feeling, an image, even a letter to yourself or someone else. This practice combines the emotional access of music with the reflection of journaling. And this should help you untangle thoughts or feelings that you might not have words for otherwise. Some therapists even recommend this as a form of music-assisted expressive writing, and this is especially for people who find traditional journaling a bit too overwhelming. I actually created a 31-day music challenge that you can get your hands on. I'll link it in the description here, but it's a great tool for journaling and reflecting with music, as it has 31 days of prompts to get you thinking about music in loads of different ways. It's all split into different themes. It will have you feeling reconnected with old favorites and even discovering new ones. So I highly recommend checking that out if you want something to get you started. Another great way to release those inner emotions is through singing or playing music. Don't estimate the power of making music, even if you don't consider yourself musical. Singing in the shower, humming to yourself, strumming a guitar, these are all ways of externalizing emotion and regulating your nervous system. Last week's episode was all about the benefits of singing, discussing how singing reduces cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone, and boosts endorphins and oxytocin, which are associated with bonding and well-being. Even just 5 minutes of singing can have great effects on mood and even your heart rate. It's just the act of creating sound with your own body. It can be so incredibly grounding. It reconnects you with your breath, your body, and just the present moment, especially during those times of anxiety, disconnection, or numbness. And actually, I promise you, you don't even need to be in tune. All your brain cares about is just the fact that you are making sound, you're making music with your breath, with your body. I promise you, you'll feel the benefits. Or if you're feeling adventurous, you can try songwriting as a catharsis and release, or just pick up that old dusty guitar. Whatever it is, I promise, you'll feel better. Finally, I don't want to forget the social power of music. Mental health can be so isolating, but music offers opportunities for connection. Joining a local choir, attending live music events, or even just sharing playlists with friends can help you feel part of something bigger. Group singing in particular has been shown to increase feelings of belonging and reduce loneliness. But if you don't feel like joining a choir, think about maybe starting a collaborative playlist with a friend or even your partner. Music can spark conversations, bridge emotional gaps, and remind us that we're not alone. Or yes, you can buy a ticket for that concert that you've had your eye on. You can blame me, okay? Attending concerts really does boost your mental health as you're getting all the same benefits as listening to music. Plus, with the crowd atmosphere literally syncing you up with everyone around you and moving your body for a workout. Whatever it might be, find a social way to engage in music today, and I promise you, it will put you on the right track to feeling more connected, not just with yourself, but with everyone around you. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope that it gave you not just insight into how music connects with mental health on so many different levels, but also some practical ideas for how to bring music into your own emotional toolkit in small but intentional ways. Again, a huge thank you to everyone who shared their stories and reflections. Your voices are what makes this show human, beyond the research and findings. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And if you have your own story about how music has supported your mental health, I always love to hear from you. You can follow or message me on Threads or Instagram at The Sound Mind Talks. And remember, music doesn't have to fix everything. It just has to be there to hold you, to move you, and make you feel a little bit less alone. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.